Right now, a handful of independent farmers and renegade gardeners are sitting on a secret that could theoretically bankrupt the multi-billion-dollar synthetic fertilizer industry. It isn't a new laboratory breakthrough or a patented chemical formula. In fact, it's a living relic, a plant that doesn't just grow in the soil, but actively constructs it from the bottom up. Imagine a crop that you plant once, and for the next 20 years, it provides a permanent, inexhaustible supply of high-potassium, high-nitrogen fertilizer for every other plant in your garden. Imagine a root system so powerful it acts like a biological drill, mining minerals from 10 feet underground, nutrients that have been locked away from the reach of human hands for millennia, and bringing them to the surface in the form of lush, green leaves. But if you walk into a modern agricultural university or pick up a mainstream textbook on crop science, you will find almost nothing about it. For 8,000 years, this plant was the backbone of the cottage economy. It was the engine of the monastic garden and the secret weapon of the self-sufficient peasant. Then, in the mid-20th century, the institutions made sure you'd never hear its name again. Why would they erase a plant that makes soil fertility free? Why would they stigmatize a crop that produces 20 times the protein of soy and survives droughts that kill entire forests? The answer is buried in a post-war chemical surplus, a forgotten Quaker researcher, and a systemic smear campaign that successfully buried the most powerful regenerative tool we have. Why don't they teach this? Because you can't patent a revolution that grows in the wild. This is Comfrey. Specifically, the sterile high-performance hybrid known as Bocking 14. Welcome to Forgotten Food Chronicles. Here we uncover the regenerative foods and ancient ecological wisdom that modern institutions tried to erase. Today, we are reopening the case of the green gold of the 19th century. We are investigating the science of the dynamic accumulator and the systemic reasons why your local garden center and the global agricultural complex would prefer you never plant a single root of it. To understand why Comfrey was suppressed, we first have to understand what it actually is. Our story begins in the 1870s, in the quiet village of Coggeshall, Essex. A man named Henry Doubleday, a Quaker smallholder, was a man haunted by ghosts. He had lived through the era of the Irish Potato Famine, witnessing 1 million people starve to death because they were dependent on a single, fragile crop. Doubleday dedicated the rest of his life to a singular humanitarian crusade, finding a universal fodder and fertilizer that could prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. In 1871, Doubleday received a package from the Palace of St. Petersburg in Russia. Inside were the roots of a mysterious hybrid. When he planted them, he witnessed something that defied the agricultural logic of the time. This wasn't the common comfrey found in English ditches. This was a natural hybrid of Symphyton officinale and Symphyton asperum. It possessed what scientists call hybrid vigor. It grew with a ferocity that seemed supernatural, yielding up to 100 tons of green matter per acre, every single year. But the real magic was happening out of sight. While modern annual crops like corn or wheat have shallow, lazy roots that rarely go deeper than a foot or two, Comfrey is a biological skyscraper. Its primary taproot is a massive, black, fleshy spike that can penetrate 10, 12, even 15 feet into the earth. It reaches the B horizon, the subsoil layer where minerals like potassium, calcium, and magnesium have leached away over centuries. Comfrey mines these minerals, pulls them up through its vascular system, and stores them in its leaves. The traditional world knew this. Ancient Greeks called it Symphyton, meaning to grow together. In Old English, it was knit bone. For centuries, it was the ultimate healer for both the land and the body. Peasants didn't just use it for medicine. They used it as instant compost. Most plant matter has a high carbon-to-nitrogen ratio, meaning it takes months to break down. But Comfrey leaves have a ratio of 14:1, almost identical to finished high-quality compost. You don't have to wait for it to rot. You simply chop and drop it. You cut the leaves, lay them on the soil, and within days, they melt into the earth, delivering a massive dose of bioavailable nutrients directly to the roots of your vegetables. In the 1950s, a researcher named Lawrence D. Hills took Doubleday's work even further. He conducted the Bocking trials, identifying the Bocking 14 cultivar. This was the holy grail. It was sterile, meaning it produced no seeds. It couldn't become an invasive weed. It stayed exactly where you planted it, acting as a permanent stationary fertilizer factory. It was the perfect engine for a self-sustaining world. So, if we have a plant that mines its own minerals, requires zero chemical inputs, and provides free fertilizer for 20 years, why isn't it the centerpiece of every farm on Earth? This is where the investigation turns dark. The disappearance of Comfrey was not an accident of history. It was a necessity of the industrial economic model. The turning point came after World War II. The world was left with a massive surplus of ammonium nitrate, the primary ingredient in high explosives. To keep the factories running, the chemical industry pivoted. They rebranded explosives as synthetic fertilizer. This birthed the Green Revolution, a system built on a linear input model. In this model, the farmer is a customer. Every year, you must buy the seeds. Every year, you must buy the nitrogen. Every year, you must buy the pesticides to protect the weakened, shallow-rooted crops that the nitrogen produces. Comfrey represents the circular model. It is the ultimate anti-commodity. Because Bocking 14 is sterile and grows from root cuttings, a farmer only ever needs to buy it once. You can take one root, chop it into 10 pieces, and have 10 plants. Next year, you have 100. It is a permanent asset that produces its own income in the form of fertility. There is no recurring revenue for a chemical company in a Comfrey-based system. Consequently, the institutions shifted. Land-grant universities and the USDA stopped funding research into perennial soil builders. They focused exclusively on annual monocultures that required heavy machinery and chemical dependency. Comfrey was relegated to the fringe of gardening, labeled as an old-fashioned herb for hobbyists, not a serious tool for agriculture. But the final blow came in the late 1970s and early 80s with the alkaloid scare. Studies began to emerge showing that Comfrey contained pyrrolizidine alkaloids, or PAs, which could cause liver damage in rats when administered in massive, concentrated doses. The media and health institutions pounced. The FDA and the UK government issued sweeping warnings. Now, here is the nuance they ignored. The risk was almost entirely associated with the internal consumption of the plant, eating it in large quantities or taking it as a pill. But the institutions used this health concern to stigmatize the entire plant. They didn't just say, "Don't eat it." They effectively stopped talking about it as a fertilizer. It was scrubbed from agricultural curricula. It was treated as a dangerous weed. By framing a soil-building miracle as a public health threat, they successfully buried the most potent threat to the synthetic fertilizer industry. They knew that if farmers realized they could grow their own NPK in a corner of their field, the dependency on the chemical supply chain would collapse. If you've made it this far, you're already part of the solution. Most people won't watch past the first minute of a video like this. They'll never know that a system like this even existed. They'll keep believing the story the industry sold them, that fertility comes from a plastic bottle and a laboratory. But you're here. You chose to learn what they tried to erase. If you think this knowledge is worth preserving, if you believe the people who suppressed it shouldn't have the final word, then make sure this reaches someone who'd actually give a damn. Subscribe to Forgotten Food Chronicles. Share this with one person who won't ignore it. That's how suppressed knowledge survives. Today, we are living through the consequences of that erasure. Our topsoil is dying. Industrial agriculture has depleted the mineral reserves of the earth, leaving us with hollow food that lacks the nutrient density of our ancestors' diets. We are trapped in a cycle of rising fertilizer prices and falling soil health. But here is the redemption. Comfrey didn't go extinct. It just went underground. In the 1970s, while the USDA was turning its back, the permaculture movement was born. Pioneers like Bill Mollison and David Holmgren recognized Comfrey for what it truly is: the engine of a regenerative ecosystem. The science is finally catching up to what Henry Doubleday knew 150 years ago. Modern studies confirm that Comfrey sequesters carbon at a rate that puts annual crops to shame. Because it is a perennial with deep roots, it builds soil organic matter year-round. It creates a habitat for beneficial insects and spiders. It is a climate-proof insurance policy. During the record droughts of the last decade, while grass turned brown and corn withered, Comfrey patches remained vibrant, lush, and green. Why? Because their roots were drinking from aquifers 10 feet down that the sun couldn't reach. You can see this in action today on regenerative farms. Farmers are using Comfrey tea, not for drinking, but for the land. They harvest the leaves, put them in a barrel with water, and let them ferment. The result is a dark, pungent liquid that is higher in bioavailable potassium than almost any commercial organic fertilizer on the market. It is the secret weapon for high-yield tomato growers and orchardists. And the best part? You can do this. You don't need a degree in agronomy or a contract with a chemical giant. You can find a source of Bocking 14 root cuttings, often from small, independent nurseries that have kept the lineage alive. You plant them in a sunny corner, perhaps near your compost pile or at the edge of your garden. You give them 1 year to establish those deep mining roots. And then, for the rest of your life, you have a source of green gold. You become the producer of your own fertility. You break the chain of dependency. As we face a future of unstable climates and depleted resources, the lessons of the Forgotten Food Chronicles become more than just history. They become a roadmap for survival. The institutions ignored Comfrey because it was too efficient, too permanent, and too free. They tried to teach us that we are separate from the soil and that we must buy our way back into its good graces. But the land remembers. Comfrey is still here, quietly rebuilding the earth 1 inch at a time. It lives in the seeds kept by elders, in the wild edges that industrial plows couldn't reach, and in the gardens of those who refuse to forget. It feeds the soil. It survives the extremes. It requires nothing from us that we cannot provide ourselves. It is a reminder that the most powerful solutions aren't always the newest ones. They are the ones we were told to forget. This is Forgotten Food Chronicles, where we uncover the regenerative foods and ancient ecological wisdom modern institutions tried to erase. If this changed how you see the ground beneath your feet, make sure you're subscribed. And if you know someone who needs to see this, someone who'd actually plant this, grow this, and remember this, send it to them. That's how erased knowledge comes back.